You want to get smart, fast, without getting lost in the weeds. We get it.
Uh-huh.
Today, we're taking a concise yet thorough look at what keeps post-secondary education honest and effective here in Georgia.
Exactly. We're diving into the minimum standards criteria. These come from the Georgia Nonpublic Postsecondary Education Commission, GNPEC, for short.
Yeah, GNPEC, got it.
Think of this as the essential checklist. It's for any institution wanting to operate or maybe already operating in the state. It really sets the baseline.
And these aren't just like bureaucratic hoops to jump through, right? These standards are about ensuring a certain level of quality and protection for anyone involved.
That's the idea. Whether you're thinking of enrolling somewhere, maybe working with an institution, or even if you're just curious about how education is regulated, this stuff gives you, well, key insights.
So what are we focusing on today? There's a whole set of standards, I assume.
There is. But we're going to zero in on the ones that most directly impact the educational experience and, let's say, institutional integrity.
Okay. Like what?
That includes Standard 1, programmatic integrity, basically, the quality of the actual learning programs. Then Standard 2, facilities and equipment, the resources they use.
Makes sense.
Standard 3, faculty and staff, the people involved. And then some really crucial policies. Standard 12 on refunds, Standard 13 for cancellations, and Standard 14, how they handle complaints.
Refunds, cancellations, complaints, definitely important for students.
Absolutely. And one thing to note up front. For institutions that already have accreditation from a U.S. Department of Education recognized agency, well, some of these standards might apply a bit differently. There's an acknowledgement of their existing oversight.
Okay, good distinction. So let's dive right into Standard 1. Programmatic integrity. This sounds like the heart of the matter, what students actually learn.
It really is fundamental. This standard, it's all about the quality and the structure of the educational programs offered. And a key point, GNPEC has to approve every single program.
Wow, every program. So schools can't just decide to teach whatever they want.
Not without oversight, no. There's a regulatory layer to make sure it meets certain criteria.
So what criteria? What goes into getting a program approved by GNPEC?
Well, each program needs clear, measurable objectives. What should students be able to do? Also, specific entrance requirements are students prepared.
Yeah.
A detailed curriculum outline, obviously, a balance of theory and practical application, ways to check if students are actually learning along the way.
Assessments. Okay.
Yay. And support for students who might be struggling, remediation services, and then, of course, a final evaluation to gauge overall mastery. Plus, they need syllabi and written lesson plans, kind of the roadmap for instruction.
That sounds pretty thorough. A well-thought-out plan from beginning to end. What about how long these programs have to be? Is that regulated?
It is. GNPEC sets minimums. For certificates, they look at what's necessary for that specific credential. For degrees, though, it's more defined. Associate's degrees need at least 60 semester credit hours.
Okay.
And bachelor's degrees require a minimum of 120 semester hours.
Standard lengths, basically.
Pretty much. There are also policies if a school wants to grant credit for prior learning or, demonstrated competency. But those have to be clearly defined and based on solid evidence.
Right, can't just give credit away.
Exactly. And here's a significant point. If an institution wants to offer actual degree programs associates, bachelors, they generally need to have institutional accreditation from a recognized accrediting body.
Ah, so that accreditation signifies a broader level of institutional quality needed for degrees. The standard also mentions future job prospects, doesn't it?
Yes, good point. Institutions need to make information available about potential employment opportunities related to their programs. And, crucially, they have to be upfront if a program doesn't meet the requirements for specific professional licenses, certifications, or, say, vocational approvals.
Transparency.
Totally. And they can't just slap the word certified on a program name unless it truly leads to a recognized certification that students have to pass, or unless GNPEC's executive director gives specific approval.
Okay. Clear expectations. What about tracking student progress? How well they're doing?
Yeah, they need a system for that. Evaluating and documenting student learning, exams, skills assessments, things like that. And it's not just about the tests. They need a clear grading system. They have to keep ongoing grade records and have defined criteria for students to actually pass their courses and graduate.
So clear benchmarks.
Right. And GNPEC can actually deny a program if they feel it's too short or just doesn't meet quality standards. Also, for unaccredited schools, there are restrictions on fully asynchronous, online-only programs, and any hands-on training, think healthcare or public safety fields, must have an in-person component.
That in-person rule for critical fields seems like just common sense, really.
It does. Safety and proper skill development. The standard also looks at the institution itself, how it's performing.
Right, evaluating themselves.
Exactly. Institutions need to periodically evaluate how well they're meeting their own mission and goals. Often this involves getting feedback through, say, student surveys. And specifically, they need to conduct faculty surveys, too, as part of that evaluation.
Faculty feedback, okay.
And one last thing on the standard. If policies change that affect faculty and staff, the institution has to communicate those changes, usually through training or meetings. Keep everyone in the loop.
Okay, that covers programmatic integrity pretty well. Let's move on to Standard 2. Facilities and equipment. It's hard to learn without the right stuff, the right place.
Absolutely. The standard basically says institutions must have the necessary facilities and equipment to deliver their programs effectively. What's necessary depends, of course, on what they teach, how many students they have.
Whether it's online or in person.
Exactly. And the specific tools or equipment needed for the field. If they offer online programs, they need a reliable platform and adequate technical support for students and faculty.
So the digital classroom needs to be functional, just like a physical one.
Precisely. They also need adequate physical spaces for instruction, administration, storage, student support services, you name it. And all the equipment, materials, software it needs to be reasonably up to date and working properly.
Makes sense. Keep things current.
Now, here's a really interesting point, especially for online institutions. Any distance education institution wanting authorization in Georgia must maintain a permanent physical location within the state.
Wait, even if all the teaching is online, they need a Georgia address.
Yes, a physical location that supports their educational offerings and their business operations. It can't just be a P.O. box.
Huh. Why is that? Any idea?
It likely provides a tangible point of contact, accountability, maybe for records, student services access, or regulatory oversight within Georgia. It anchors them to the state.
Okay. Interesting requirement. What else for facilities?
Well, standard stuff, too. All facilities, buildings, grounds, equipment must meet all the relevant federal, state, and local codes, fire safety, accessibility, etc. And finally, their learning resource system, the library, basically.
Physical or digital, I assume.
Right. It needs relevant and current texts, periodicals, research journals, databases, multimedia, electronic resources, whatever materials are necessary and appropriate for the level of education they offer.
Got it. Resources need to match the programs. Okay, let's talk about the people. Standard 3, faculty and staff, often called personnel, right?
Correct. This standard focuses on ensuring that the people working there, faculty, administrators, staff, are actually qualified, based on their education and experience.
Where does that education need to come from?
Typically from accredited institutions or licensed entities or something GNPEC deems equivalent. And if someone has credentials from outside the U.S., they need a proper evaluation from a certified service. And naturally, if the field requires it, like nursing or teaching, faculty must hold current licenses or certifications.
Makes sense. What are the specifics for faculty qualifications? Does it vary?
It does vary. For certificate granting institutions, instructors generally need either a bachelor's degree in their field from a recognized accreditor or at least 2 years of relevant work or teaching experience.
Okay, degree or experience for certificates.
Right. For degree granting institutions, it steps up. Faculty usually need a degree in their teaching subject that's at least one level higher than the program level they're teaching. So a master's to teach bachelor's level courses generally, again, from a recognized accreditor.
Higher level, higher credential.
Exactly. And degree granting institutions also need a reasonable number of faculty holding doctorate or other terminal degrees in their fields.
What if someone has amazing experience, but maybe not the exact degree?
There's some flexibility. In certain cases, with approval from GNPEC's executive director, significant professional experience or recognition can substitute for the formal degree requirement. It's evaluated case by case. And for graduate programs, the bar is even higher, usually needing a doctorate or terminal degree.
Okay, so qualifications scale up. What about other staff, like administrators?
Yep, the standard covers them too. Institutions need an organizational chart showing they have adequate personnel to function effectively. New hires need a proper orientation, and everyone should get an employee handbook and sign off saying they received it.
Basic HR practices.
Pretty much. There are also specific qualifications for the institution's director, often involving degrees and administrative or supervisory experience, again with that potential experience substitution clause with approval. If a school has multiple distinct program areas, like, say, business and healthcare, each area needs a qualified program head.
Department chairs, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. Administrators and supervisors also need relevant degrees or professional experience. And, oh, this is important if an institution uses recruitment agents.
Recruiters to
Yeah.
get students.
Yes. The standard prohibits them from using any false, deceptive, misleading, or unfair practices. Protections against high pressure or dishonest sales tactics.
Good to have that spelled out.
Definitely. And finally, institutions need to keep minimum records for faculty. Proof they're employed, their education and experience documentation, proof of their highest degree, and records showing they received orientation and policy updates.
Keeping track of qualifications. Okay, let's shift gears to financial protections for students. Standard 12, refund policy. This sounds critical.
It is. This ensures some fairness if a student starts a program but doesn't finish. Now remember that distinction between accredited and unaccredited.
Yes. How does it apply here?
If an institution is accredited by a recognized agency, they can generally use their own accreditor-approved refund policy, but they have to submit that policy to GNPEC every year.
So GNPEC still sees it.
Right. And here's the check. If GNPEC gets a significant number of student complaints about refunds at that accredited school, and if GNPEC's own standard policy is more favorable to students, GNPEC reserves the right to require that accredited institution to adopt the GNPEC policy instead.
A safety net to ensure students are protected even at accredited schools if issues arise. What about unaccredited institutions?
They have much stricter specific rules they must follow. Their refund policy has to be included right in the enrollment agreement and the school catalog.
Upfront.
Yes. Students need to request refunds in writing, and here's the main part. If a student withdraws before completing 50% of the program, they are entitled to a prorated refund. It's based on how much of the program they completed.
So you pay for what you used up to the halfway point.
Essentially, yes. Institutions also have to use a specific withdrawal form. They must notify students if they are being administratively withdrawn, like for non-attendance, and critically, they have to issue any owed refunds within 45 days of the official withdrawal date.
45 days, okay.
Right.
What about non-refundable fees? Can they keep application fees and stuff?
For unaccredited institutions, there are tight limits. They can charge one single application fee up to $150, but only if it was clearly disclosed beforehand. They can also potentially keep fees paid for third-party goods or services that the institution genuinely can't reuse or cancel, like maybe specific software licenses or certification exam vouchers bought for that student.
Okay, specific, limited exceptions.
Very limited. No other administrative fees, registration fees, etc. can be designated as non-refundable for unaccredited schools under this standard.
That provides pretty significant financial protection for students, especially at unaccredited schools. Now, related to that is Standard 13, the cancellation policy. How's this different from refunds?
Cancellation usually refers to backing out very early or situations where the institution changes things. First, there's a 72-hour rule.
A cooling off period.
Exactly. If a student signs an enrollment agreement but then cancels within 72 hours, 3 business days, they're entitled to a full refund of all tuition and fees paid, except for those permissible non-refundable fees we just discussed, like the application fee.
So a chance to change your mind quickly without much penalty.
Right. The other part of the standard covers what happens if the institution cancels a program or makes such a significant change that enrolled students just can't reasonably continue.
Like they stop offering the major you signed up for.
Precisely. In that case, the institution has obligations. They have to make timely arrangements to accommodate those affected students, maybe transfer them to a comparable program, or find an alternative. If they can't make equitable alternative arrangements, as judged by GNPEC, then they must refund all the money the students paid for that program.
Okay, so they can't just leave students hanging if they pull the plug on a program.
Nope. They have to make it right or give the money back.
Good protection. All right, last one we're focusing on. Standard 14, the complaint policy. Vital for student recourse if things go wrong.
Absolutely critical. Every institution is required to have a clear written procedure for students to file complaints or grievances.
What needs to be in that procedure?
It needs to spell out the steps. How a student submits a formal complaint, what the submission requirements are, how the institution will review it, the timelines for their response. Very importantly, it must inform the student of their right to appeal the institution's decision to GMPEC if they're not satisfied.
So it has to mention appealing to the state agency.
Yes, and it must include GNPEC's contact information, the agency name, their phone number, and ideally a direct link to the online complaint form on the GNPEC website. Make it easy for students to find.
Where does this policy need to live?
It has to be included in the school catalog and in the enrollment agreement. And if the institution has a website, the complaint policy needs to be posted there too.
Multiple places. Hard to miss.
That's the goal. And for institutions that have actual physical facilities, they also need to prominently post the complaint procedure in a public area where students can easily see it, like a bulletin board in a common area.
Okay. So wrapping this up, these standards, particularly the ones we've dug into, really create a framework, don't they? A framework for quality, accountability, consumer protection in Georgia's non-public post-secondary education world.
Exactly. These minimum standards, that's what they are, a baseline. They aim to ensure a certain level of program quality, make sure schools have adequate resources, that the faculty are qualified, and that there are clear, fair policies around the financial aspects, like refunds and cancellations, and a process for handling complaints.
And for you listening, understanding these fundamentals, even just at this level, gives you a really valuable lens. You can use it to view post-secondary options in Georgia, whether you're thinking about enrolling, or maybe you work in the sector, you're just interested in how this stuff is overseen. It empowers you to ask better questions.
Right, and it leads to maybe a bigger question for you to think about, something beyond just these roles. In a world where education is changing so fast, online learning, new models, new technologies, how do these fundamental standards, these baselines, strike the right balance? How do they ensure both accountability and quality while still allowing room for innovation in how we learn and teach?
That's a good thought to chew on. Balancing established quality checks with the need to evolve, something for you to consider.